All right. It is now 12:15, so we are going to get started with our next presentation, which is a panel. It's being facilitated by Brandon Packman of ASTA, and this panel is going to be talking about how navigating change, seed industry experts panel. So I'm going to mute myself and take off my video and allow you, Brandon, to take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Morgan. Appreciate that, and I appreciate the introduction. Let me just share my screen here. Um, yeah, entire screen. Great. Here we go. Right. So I am Brandon Packman. I am the Director of Government Affairs at the American Seed Trade Association, or ASTA. Really excited to be moderating this panel today. And so, just a little bit about the American Seed Trade Association before we get into the panel itself. ASTA represents nearly 700 companies involved in the breeding, production, distribution, and the marketing of seeds. We have members that are at all different aspects of the seed supply chain. We have seed producers, we have seed distributors, plant breeders, researchers. So all different kinds of aspects of the seed supply chain, supplying a broad range of high quality seeds, whether that's row crops, grasses, forages, flowers, vegetables, cereals. We like to call ourselves the alfalfa to zucchini of agriculture because we really represent every different kind of seed production that you can think of. And so our goal really is to be the voice for the seed industry, whether that's engaging with different parts of the agriculture supply chain, or serving as a way for the industry to connect to representing the seed industry before Congress and the federal government, which is more what I do specifically. We really seek to be that effective voice and to bring the seed industry together, to advocate and to work together as one industry, all together. And so, I mentioned that we have ASTA represents all different kinds of seed companies, and a big portion of our membership is conservation seed. And so conservation seed companies, obviously, they play a critical role in supporting conservation programs, basically by producing and developing high quality seed and native seed mixes. For farmers, they need the ability to meet the eligibility requirements of a Department of Agriculture conservation program, or a Bureau of Land Management restoration program, or a state program, right? To be able to meet those requirements, you need to have that high quality seed. And so, ASTA members are there producing those high quality seed mixes, being able to update those seed mixes, and to be able to distribute them as well. And so, actually, you look at this map here. You look at the bottom. There is a link, and if you go to that link, you can actually look up and see where the nearest ASTA member that is producing environments or conservation cover crop seeds is relative to your location. And what I think you'll find, both by that membership list, but also by our panel, is that ASTA membership has a presence, and when it comes to conservation seed, has a presence over much of the United States and even into Canada and Mexico. So with that, let's get into the panel itself. I'm really excited to bring them along and to have this discussion together. Between Alan, John, Jesse, Brett, and Trent, we have over 100 years of experience in the seed industry. So they're really excited to bring in expertise to you and to offer that perspective. So I'm going to call on each of the members, and they're going to do a 1 to 2 minute overview of themselves, give a little introduction, and to also talk a little bit about their company. So why don't we first turn to Alan? Could you go and give your introduction?
Yeah, my name is Al Holloman. I work with Agassiz Seed and Supplies up in the Great North here in West Fargo, North Dakota. Um, we work with a number of local growers to market and consolidate their native seeds in the upper northern plains. A lot of our seed growers are people who raise half a dozen different species, and we'll bring that together and put them together with a number of other growers to be able to access some of the larger governmental bids, DOT, that sort of thing. So, um, thanks for allowing us to be part of your group here today, and that's who I am.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So why don't we go to Brett next? Let me just pull up your slides, Brett. Got them right here. So I'll turn it to you.
All right, let me get my view right here.
Yeah.
Do you have my slides pulled up? I can't see them from my side.
You can't see them. Hold on one sec. Okay, let me share my screen again. Hold on. Okay. Can you see them now, Brett?
Perfect, I can. Thank you
Great.
very much. I'm Brett Bammert, President and CEO of Bammert Seed Company. I appreciate everybody joining us today and having us today to speak. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Bammert Seed. We can go to the next slide, please. We've been in business since 1951. My granddad actually started the business. And today we sell over 400 different species, 120 to 150 ecotypes and varieties that we specifically grow on our farm. We have field sizes from a half acre all the way up to 350 acres now. There's 132 total fields. 30 of them are less than 5 acres piece, and 102 of them are greater than 5. And we have partnerships with Texas Native Seed Group here in Texas, the Southwest Seed Partnership Group, and other various state, local, and federal agencies. All right. Next. We have 3 processing lines here in Millshoe. We have our big line that you see there on the bottom right. It is fully automated. It runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. With about 8 of those hours a day being unmanned with nobody here. We've got a small lot line that you see there on the bottom left that helps us clean the 5 acre and smaller fields. And we have one other line that's not pictured here that we use predominantly for our slick seeded species. We have a color sorter that we use for some problem lots, and we kind of specialize in prescription blends for that customer based on what their soil types are, what their project goals are, and where they are in the United States. Next slide, please. All right, here's a picture of the sales, production, and some of the warehouse team. All together, we've been in the industry over 217 years, and there again, we've got a great team. That's what makes our operation run. And I love one of the quotes that Rob Cook here in our office says, we have to live with our outcomes. And every bag that goes out, we feel like that outcome is going to be determined by the quality of seed we put in it and how we consult with our customer on ultimately how to get it in the ground, when to do it. And so we're very proud of that. Next slide, please. All right, I believe that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Brett. And I think it's so cool that you're continuing a family company. That must be very meaningful. Uh, why don't we turn to John next? Can you go?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me here. My name is John Seymour. I'm the owner of Roundstone Native Seed out of Central Kentucky. And traditionally, we were beef cattle and tobacco farmers. But about 32 years ago, my dad and I went out with 5-gallon buckets and we started hand collecting different native grasses, wildflowers, and wetland plants for some some use in National Park Service, Mammoth Cave, close by, and the Nature Conservancy. And so since that time, we now raise a little over 300 different species of native grasses, wildflowers, wetland plants, and we do that on about 3,500 total acres. And we actually have satellite production in 7 other states. We have different ecoregions that those seeds need to be raised in, but everything comes back here to Kentucky to be cleaned and conditioned and processed and stored until it's time to sell it mixed. So as of today, we are still wildland collectors, as in we are still getting new ecotypes all the time for whatever reasons. We're still native harvesters, and that we do some wildland harvest as well. We're nurserymen and greenhousemen. We are increasers, growers, cleaners, custom cleaners, and we do a lot of turnkey installation and restoration as well. So look forward to talking with everyone.
Thanks, John. It sounds like a little bit of everything there. Jesse, could you give your introduction now?
Absolutely. Thank you for having us today. Thanks to the Native Seed Conference and to the board and organizers for putting this panel together. We're appreciative to be at the table. So my name is Jessie Strinmone. I am the operations manager at Shooting Star Native Seeds. We are located in the far southeast corner of Minnesota in Spring Grove. Our business has been here for about 40 years. We started as traditional agriculture. We transitioned to sod farming along the way, and now we have about 25 employees focusing primarily on native seed production. We manage about 2,500 acres of our own production and work with, like other companies have said, work with other growers, other seed companies, other contractors to offer about 300 species with ecotypes from throughout the Midwest. So our service area primarily includes the Midwest, the Dakotas through Michigan, and then about as far south as northern Missouri, Nebraska area. So we specialize in local ecotype seed. We offer seed for contractors, installers, government agencies, other seed companies, landowners, municipalities, conservation, wildlife organizations. So a little bit of everything. And like other companies already introduced, we are, like I said, we're growers. We grow, harvest, we clean, we store, we mix, we ship. Some of those in 1 pound boxes and some of them in very full semis. So a little bit of everything. So glad to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
That's awesome, Jesse. It's a great point when you talk about that a lot of you guys are producers as well too, and it's a point that I want to get to later on in the panel. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Lastly, I'll kick it over to Tren.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. Yeah, I'm Tren Hagman. I'm with Native Seed Group, and within Native Seed Group, I operate under Granite Seed Company. So Native Seed Group, we have 10 different companies under that umbrella. Across the companies, we do production on around 3,000 acres across all of our different farms. And then we've got 10 distribution points across the United States, stretching from California over to Kansas. Like I said, I'm specifically with Granite Seed. Granite Seed itself has been around since 1988. We started in Utah, and then now we since have 3 additional locations in Nevada, Colorado, and Arizona. We do distribution for our farming network of native grasses up out of Montana and Washington. And then we also do wildland collections throughout the entire Intermountain West. We specialize in Intermountain region and also Southwest United States with an emphasis on Arizona and some New Mexico collections. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Tren. Definitely a great presence there. So I appreciate you guys all going and giving a little background, and let's just start at the basics here. At the basic level. I want to turn to Al at the start. Could you just kind of give a little bit of an overview of the conservation seed industry, planted acres, kind of 101 on what that looks like?
Sure. You want to pull up my my
Sure,
slide
I
deck?
could. Yeah.
While we're doing that, well, the native seed industry has a long history of partnership with governmental agencies in the United States. It all kind of got its start back in 1935 when the federal government enacted a law where they put together the Regional Plant Materials Center, and those were all tasked with collecting and increasing native species for use in agriculture and other projects. Since then, that stewardship has gone through, a number of changes over the years, and the native seed industry has a long history of working with federal government agencies to produce good quality native grass and wildflower species for restoration projects. Um, One of the biggest projects that has ever come across is in 1985, there's a program called CRP that was part of the Farm Bill that reclaimed and restored ag land to grasses to reduce erosion and to decrease the crop supply. One of the benefits of that was the increase in the amount of native grasses and forbs across the whole United States. To today, we currently have 26 million acres enrolled in that program that are providing habitat and pollinator habitat for all across the United States. So, a lot of acres that were involved in that program. Well, fast forward to the native seed industry today. The data that you see up on your screen right now, over the last 2 years, I took data from the USDA. Farmers and ranchers that are involved in the farm program have to report planted and harvested acres to the USDA, and these reports come out every few months or so on intended acres and planted acres. Well, I took the 2025 and 2024 actual planted acres and pulled out everything that wasn't seed, and then pulled out everything that wasn't a native grass species or forb species. So these are actual seed production acres across the United States. And you see, we've got a pretty good cross section of bigger and smaller areas where there's more or less acres. But what I want you to take away from this is that there's currently 45,000 acres of production that are actively producing native grasses for projects. Um, you want to go to the next slide for me, Brandon? One of the things that I noticed when I was going through those 110,000 lines of data that were in there was I saw an awful lot of areas where it said um, le field left standing. And so I dug into that a little bit more and pulled those acres out. And what I found was that there are just about 34,000 acres of species specific planted acres. So big blue stem, little blue stem, switchgrass, forbs, those types of things that were not harvested in the United States. And so there's a large amount of untapped species there that are currently not being tapped into. Um, so I think the native seed industry has got, it's got a good infrastructure put together, and there's potential to do more with it. So that's my overview of the state of the nation's native seed industry.
That's fascinating, Al. And I think one it's interesting that there's more potential for growth, but also I think what the data you brought up shows is that even though some areas have a greater presence of more acres than others, every part of the country still has some kind of presence, which I think is really cool. So I want to go and talk to John, and could you kind of give a little bit of a perspective on seed production timelines and the ability to produce that quality seed while meeting regulatory requirements? I think you're on mute, John.
Have you got me now?
There we go.
Sorry about that. I'm happy to try to do that for you. So I mentioned earlier, on the side there that I grew up on a tobacco farm. Tobacco is a crop that's a 90 to 100-day crop. That is a seasonal crop. So we plant in the spring and we harvest in late summer. So when we look at natives, we don't go by spring, summer, fall, winter. We go by the season they grow in. And oftentimes that's 2 to 3 years before they reach maturity, much less even make seed. So therein lies kind of the issue with what we have. But I always used to say it all starts with a seed, but that's not the truth. It all starts with a need. Somebody has to need that seed. It has to be desired, and there has to be a demand for it for us to even mess with it. And maybe it's CRP that Al alluded to, or maybe it's other organizations, or it's National Park, U.S. Forest Service, whoever it is. But initially, we have to obtain that seed to even get a start. But obtaining the seed sounds like the beginning as well, and it is not. The true start of it is when we have to identify where it's at. And that means multiple trips to whatever natural area where we're going to find out if it's there, if it's right, what day it's going to be right. So all that time is taken multiple times, multiple issues to do our first gathering. Then that seed is brought home, it is cleaned and conditioned and processed. And then hopefully we have enough of this genetic material that has been brought together from these mother plants to put into a greenhouse. And then that's when the nursery production starts. So that fall we harvested, that winter we cleaned, that spring we planted, we hopefully have plugs. And once we have those plugs, we hope to be able to set those, and we know they're going to grow that first year. And the problem with growing the first year, the old adage is natives first they sleep, then they creep, and then they leap, is we have to do maintenance to keep those clean. And maybe that's hand roguing, pulling weeds, maybe it's wicking, maybe it's mowing, and I hate to say the H word, but maybe it's herbicide, ways that we have to clean these things up. So it's multiple times that we're in the field to get these things going, which means quite a bit of cost as well. Along with that, after that is all said and done, we have to do our hand collection. And during the hand collection of the initial stuff, after the nursery production has begun, we take it and we put it in the ground with mechanical transplanters. We may do it by hand, we may do it with drop seeders, and then we have to keep them alive. So in order for us to keep them alive, we have to give them water. They're just babies. Natives are tough, but no matter what, when they're babies, and we have to tend to them. So it could very well be that we've planted this year, and if it's an annual crop, maybe we got some seed off of it. And maybe that collection came from U.S. Forest Service, where we got quite a bit of seed where we collected ourselves. Maybe it came from a plant material center that Brett's going to talk to you about, where they said, here, farmer, here's a 50-pound bag. Or maybe it's a smaller collection where somebody gave us 2,500 seeds. So this anticipates what type of harvest we're going to have at the end of that. And also we have to take into account what it takes. Was the climate good to us? Did we get rain? Did we not get rain? Did the wind blow the anthers off? Did the aphids take us? Did the leaf borers take us? The voles, the drought, all those things that cause us to have problems and not even have a harvest. And the latter part of that is we're dealing with ecotype seeds that we don't know about them yet. We don't know if they will be good seed producers or not good seed producers. So after we have waited this initial time, 2 to 3 years to get the initial seed, and most likely since it came from a greenhouse, we're looking at a quarter acre, half acre to an acre. That 3-year time gave us enough seed, which is our initial start, that we would then replant and go for another 2 to 3 years. So that is a 6-year turnaround for us to take something from a small amount to a feasible amount. And then if we want to go to large scale production for use, we also have to do that. Lastly, all that has to be cleaned, conditioned, dried, and we try and do our best to store it because it is a perishable inventory. We all hit around 50 degrees, 50% humidity to keep that perishable inventory from dying. So in short, it takes us quite a bit of time, and it all depends on who's going after that. Maybe it is U.S. Forest Service, maybe it is for CRP, or maybe we as growers have decided we just need another type of ecotype or species of seed to make our mixes better and more rich.
Wow, that is it's incredible to hear you talk about the amount of steps and the amount of things you have to consider and to really prepare for it. And it's a years long timeline before you're actually it's going through the whole process. So I think that it must be a lot of uncertainty, right? And so how do you manage that uncertainty, John? Like demand, the funding, the regulation, right? That all is pretty variable, but you have to plan several years out. How do you manage all of that?
Well, that word's right, uncertainty. And we mitigate it best we can. We're judicious in what we plant, how much we plant, and we try not to oversaturate. Again, I keep mentioning it's perishable. It sits on that shelf, and as soon as it starts losing, it's dead. But the long and short of it is it's still farming. No matter what the markets do for us, we have made these investments, and we just spoke of 6 to 10 year investments. We're growing. So we have to be very careful about what we do. And the way that I mitigate it is that I try and stay in communication with like all the people on this conference. Let's talk. Let's find out what you need, when you need it. I don't want to overproduce, but if you need it, we all as a group at ASTA, we want to make sure we can provide you with what you do.
Well, 100%. I think that's a great message. Jesse, I want to turn back to you and something that you said in your introduction, and it's most of the people, most of the panelists here, they are farmers first too, right? So even though you represent the native seed industry, right, that you're also, that's part of your identity as well. Could you talk a little bit about what it means to be a native seed farmer and at the scale that you're operating at?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think John hit on some of this already, but sometimes I think that the word industry can almost be a concern in an audience like this. We come across as these big, scary producers. And I think it's just important to remember that we're really not that big. Shooting Star only has 25 employees. There aren't that many of us doing what we do. We're all working really hard to be in these conversations, and part of the work to identify what that need that John talks about really is. Most of us have second or third generations or fourth generations of family in our companies. We're contributing to our communities. We're donating to local organizations. We're working hard to make sure that our employees are taken care of, all of those things. And in many ways, I think that, the industry is really doing things so similarly to everybody on this call. So our scale might be a little bit different, but like you said, we're farmers first. We walk the fields, we deal with broken down equipment, we duct tape things when are necessary, we jerry rig equipment. And sometimes even as industry, we're using trial and error as much as anybody else. And so, it would be great if our industry had everything all figured out and we were the ones that had the answers for seed production and volume and all of those things. And we don't. And so, that's why we're grateful to be part of these types of conversations and stay in communication, like John said, about what those demands are going to be, about what species are needed, about what scale we need. So us, we can help bridge those partners and maybe bring down the scariness of big industry being at the table. We're not that big.
And to add on that, you experience the same challenges and pressures that producers face too. To further, I think emphasize to the point that yes, it's a native seed industry and companies, but also producers first. That's just part of what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's really what John said. We gamble with the weather. We take all of those risks. We cross our fingers and send a hope and a prayer that sometimes it works out sometimes. So
100%. So Tren, there has been a lot of changes in DC, over the past year or so, a lot of developments. How has the native seed industry just been impacted? Are projects still underway? Have they been affected? Could you talk a little about that piece?
Sure. Yeah, there were definitely some changes. But every year we deal with federal funding on a lot of programs we work with. Al mentioned CRP. That's one that's kind of been affected recent years. But as far as federal funding for other projects, seems to have been okay last year. There were still energy jobs going, highway jobs. Those seem to be funded. So just the uncertainty with funding every year and where that's going to land is kind of what impacts us. And that goes into the decision making that John was talking about as far as, how we all think about our production and what we're looking to stock up on or, what we're tearing out and putting new fields in. The other part of it for the industry is the BLM seed purchases and just how consistent those are going to be. They're a large buyer of seed in the native industry. And with the changes, that seemed to stay pretty consistent this past year as far as what they were buying. They are trending more towards natives, and they still do some introduced types for quick restoration stuff. But there is definitely a trend going more natives within that buy. The changes last year, the shutdown was probably the biggest effect. It kind of delayed some shipments, delayed some collections. And then also some of the changes last year affected permits for wildland collections across the Western U.S. There was changes in local field offices. And so just getting access to permits was a challenge for the industry last year.
If I'm picking up on a theme here, it's uncertainty, right? And I think part of what ASTA it does is to work with the federal government to try to get answers to understand what's going on with this specific program. Why isn't why is BLM doing this? Why what is the National Resources Conservation Services? What are they? Why are they making this change? And to bring that information back to the membership and to the native seed industry. So I appreciate you kind of going into that piece a little bit as well too, Tren. Brett, I think that this was something that the Tren mentioned, but I want to ask you the plant materials centers. Could you talk a little bit about what they are? And Al talked a little about them too, but could you just go a little bit more into detail about what they are and what resources they provide? Brett, you're on mute. Just FYI.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. So plant material centers have been around as long as some of our companies have been around. Plant material centers have been around much longer than we have. I'm sure they're at least at 100 years, if not longer than that. But they were tasked early on to go out and do a lot of the things that John was talking about, collect species out in the wild, bring them back in, evaluate them, study them for viability, ease of establishment, efficiency of rainfall to forage conversion. And so the plant material centers did a lot of work over the last 100 years, evaluating different species, releasing the varieties that are out there today, which I would say that the vast majority of reclaimed acres in the United States have been reclaimed with some varietal species that came from the plant material center. So they're a great resource. I think they've had some budget constraints, and so they're not able to produce quite as much seed as they historically have to give to producers and growers like ourselves. And so instead of getting 100 or pounds or 150 pounds to go plant a 5 or 10 acre field, we get 5 pounds, and then we take those 5 pounds, put them in a greenhouse, a lot like John was talking about, grow them out, and we start off with a 1, 2, 3 acre transplant field, and then we blow them up to get the field size up to where we need it to be. If you have not gone to visit your local plant material center, I would encourage everybody listening to make an appointment with them and go see. They're a wealth of information. Matter of fact, as long as we've been in business, we still try to go to a plant material center at least once a year. We learn something from them. It's great conversation. They're willing to show you all their plots they have. But as far as resources that they have that can help somebody trying to get started growing native grasses, I think the key is technical guidance. They can get you information on species they've evaluated, why some of them worked, why some of them didn't, how the ones that did get released, what they were looking for when they released those, potential yields on those species, herbicide options and weed control options, pest pressure, harvest methods, why some species were not released again. There's a lot of reasons why, and they can kind of help dive into that. So I would just encourage anybody that's got time and to swing by their local plant material center and utilize them. There's a lot of information that they have also that's not published that they can get their hands on and answer some questions. So they are a great resource.
That's a really good piece of advice, Brett and Morgan. I appreciate you shouting out the Corvallis Center. And just when you were talking, Brett, I was kind of getting this sense from the other panelists too. But there's a lot of working with different stakeholder groups to really make this industry work. Whether it's working with the Plant Material Center you're working with federal programs, or you're working with producers, right? And you're selling seed to them. There's a lot of working with different stakeholder groups. So Al, I think just with your work in the industry, what have you learned about successful partnerships, especially when it comes to meeting the demand and the customer base and where they're at? Al, you're on mute too.
There we go. Like I said, we're here. We're willing to sit down at the table and iron through some things. We have a long history of doing that. I know my predecessor here at Agassiz Seed spent a number of years along with a bunch of predecessors of the companies I'm on with, meeting with the USDA before CRP came out and while CRP was coming out, and some of those large programs, and sit down. What are we trying to do? What do you need? When are you going to need it? What species are you looking for? Those things are, we have a long history of doing that with governmental agencies and public entities like that. Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, we've partnered with them on increasing materials for them. To go back to the Plant Material Center, like these guys were talking about, I see that as a valuable resource to local ecotype things right now. I think that's an untapped source in our trade right now. I think some of the initial increases in some of these really, really tough to get going native species could be going through there, and they could speed up that operation for the industry by taking out those first 2 or 3 years of cost, and then having the material ready for somebody to increase once it got to field size. One of the things that I've watched over the last 20 to 30 years that I think has been a detriment to the use of native seeds in the United States is the narrowing of specific source identified material, making some of those areas so small that it's pretty hard to come up with a need enough, like John talked about, that you can scale it up and make it work. So that's what I've seen over the last 35 years I've been doing this.
Well, your wisdom and your perspective is much appreciated. I think it's really really helpful.
I have a perspective. I'm not sure about wisdom in there.
So, Jesse, I want to go back to something that you were talking about. Talking about those production pressures, we were going about that a little bit, and seed companies are their producers too, right? How do you address issues like genetic integrity, seed quality, ecological appropriateness, particularly when you have production pressures?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a very important question that all of our participants on this panel should be asking. Seed quality and integrity has been a driving part of this industry forever. It's been built on the idea that getting the right seed in the ground is crucial to the project's outcome. And I think by and large, this industry is honest and truthful and well-intentioned. And just to give you a few examples, of course, we have a ton of operational quality control measures in place, and maybe people don't realize how long that list is, but things like, every container of seed at every stage of harvest and cleaning and storage is labeled very intentionally to be tracked from beginning to end. We do full cleanouts of equipment. We measure the seed as it goes into the bag and measure the bag as we ship it out. There's all of these quality control measures in place that all of our companies do. I think it's another thing. I think it's important for everybody to really understand Pure Live Seed. I mean, we largely sell natives on PLS, and what that means is that what you're purchasing is what is certified to grow, and it's taking into account the tests for inert material and all of that stuff. So really digging in and making sure you understand that, I think, is important. The source identified native seed programs are kind of a built-in quality control program that we operate under. And these programs assure that the proper identity of the plant has been maintained through the whole process. And so for us in Minnesota, we're certified with the Minnesota Crop Improvement Association. They inspect our fields, they inspect our storage, they inspect the original remnants where the seed might come from, and make sure that we're maintaining that chain of command appropriately, and then issue a certification for that seed. And so there's that quality control process built in. Our Minnesota government will only use certified seed for the most part. So it's kind of in that extra step of quality assurance. And that's always in the back of all of our minds. I think ecological appropriateness, I mentioned earlier, getting the right seed on the ground is the most important thing that you can do. But to do that, it's a combination of the seed that is available and the seed that it meets the ecological conditions. And that's what we're constantly battling. Just a couple of other things in terms of quality control and making sure that we're getting the best seed out there. I think all of us on this panel are part of different committees and boards that are part of bigger native seed conversations. So when it comes to putting your state's requirements around CRP together, working through those recipes, working through those rules, we continue to show up at the table because we want the right seed on the ground. And, we're part of committees and boards that are focused on seed regulation and seed trade rules, and making sure that it works both for our industry, but that it is ultimately getting folks what they need. So, and then just lastly, I feel like we spend a lot of time at conferences like this very intentionally so that we can connect with folks that are on the ground and doing restoration work, and really help build that trust between us. Obviously there's a bit of a gamble when somebody buys seed from anybody, right? Whether it be industry or not, and a gamble in that we're selling what we say we're selling. And I think we as an industry work every day to earn that trust from our customers and our folks that are using our seed. So that's about it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think Brett, your colleague had the quote, right? You live with the quality. It seems to embody what you were talking about, Jesse. Yep. And I was just I didn't realize how many quality control steps that you take, and just to add on top of what John was talking about with the number of aspects of the whole seed production process. I mean, that's a lot to kind of consider and to take in there. So there was just throughout the session and the conference, I know there was a lot of helpful information shared about seed production, restoration partnerships, right? What do each of you want to share with the audience about native seed, the native seed industry? Like just everyone, just kind of one thing you want the attendees to kind of leave with, to thinking about the native seed industry.
I'll go first.
Sure. Trent, why don't you go first? You took yourself off mute first.
Yeah, I would just kind of second what others have said in this talk, is that we're here to help. The earlier you can get us involved in a project, where you're looking at local ecotypes and just start talking about it, whether it's just checking on availability or seeing what our interest is in actually getting it into production for you and on a small scale. And, if it's a larger project, if you need several thousand pounds, that can take multiple years. So the earlier you can involve the industry, the better. And we're here. I think all of us have done that in the past and are willing to do that going forward.
So Brett, why don't I go to you next?
All right. I'm going to echo a little bit of what Trent said. Is we really are here to help. We are here to explore what options and what strategies we can put together to create a solution that works for everybody. But I think the biggest thing and the most important piece to making it work is to start the conversation and to start it early and take some time and go by your local seed company of your seed company of your choice and sit down and have a conversation. What are you needing? And let's sit down and figure it out. And if given enough time, I cannot imagine that anybody in the industry wouldn't bend over backwards to make something work. And so we just find a lot of times that we get brought to the table too late in the conversation and our hands are tied and there's just not much we can do about it on such a short time period.
Yeah, I love that message, Brett. Engaging, staying engaged, I think is so important.
And even if you don't
Jesse.
need anything, maybe come by and talk to us. And then when you do, we'll already have the relationship established. So
to figure things out and problems a little quicker and more smoothly, for sure. Jesse, to you.
Yeah, I think just one thing to add. I mean, I echo what others have said, but one thing to add is that our industry is strong. The supply is good. We often hear that you can't find the native seed that you need. And sometimes that's true for certain species or in certain years or certain ecotypes, like Al said. But the industry is, I mean, my warehouse is full. And I think others would echo the same, is that the seed is available and we're ready to come to the table, as we have done for 40, 50, 60 years. So yeah, just open the doors and have the conversation. And next time you're in Spring Grove, Minnesota, you're more than welcome to drop by.
That's awesome.
To piggyback a little bit on what Jesse was just talking about, there is that sometimes that perfect is the enemy of progress. And I don't think we give native grasses in Forbes enough credit for the wideness of the adaptability that they actually do have. It's not 25 miles. It's not 50 miles. I think it's greater than that. And so if you're looking for a species, even though it isn't exactly perfect for what you're looking for or what you're trying to find, something pretty close is probably going to work close to as well anyway. And if it's readily available, don't give up on that species just because it's outside of your ecoregion. And if you ever stop in at Agassiz, the beer's always cold.
You had to one up what Brett and Jesse were saying, right?
Yeah, we don't even need refrigerators to keep it cold up here, but
that's fair. All right, John.
Yeah, so as far as the group goes here, the mission for a great deal of us has always been ecologically appropriate, right seed, right place. And that's what we're trying to do. And I had an epiphany a long time ago, or several years ago anyway, that I've got this mission and I know what I want to do. And I know how many seeds I need to raise. And by working with other people, by partnering with other people and other growers, people who want this, that I can do way more good than I could ever do on my own. So again, we keep saying we're happy to be here. We're happy to be at the table. Like my daddy said, you don't eat if you're not at the table, but we are happy to be here and we want to work with you. And I think our industry, working with you guys with your needs, or whether you're a grower or you're just a restorationist, I think we complement each other very well. And we're open-minded and our ears are sure open, and we're grateful for opportunities to work with you.
Absolutely. So let's pivot here and kind of get into a little more of that discussion piece and have a little back and forth with the audience. So why don't we turn to questions now? I think we have the Q&A here. We have someone who's going to curate the questions here. So is that you, Morgan?
Yeah, that is.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Well, I just sorted them by the most liked question. So I'll just throw it out here and whoever wants to speak can start speaking. So the first one we have is if a client wants to start using a species not currently available commercially, how can we work with seed producers to advocate bringing that to market? I know y'all have touched on this some, but anything else you want to say?
Brad, I'm happy to take this one. You may want to take this one. We'll hack it up here. So when we talk about partnerships, oftentimes it's not supply versus desire. We all need, or we want what we want, but it's a true demand. So if you have a need that you have, then oftentimes how that is done is you can do something similar to the BLM, where it's an IDIQ, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. You can do something like the U.S. Forest Service, where they're able to come in and hire you to do, or hire people like us or you to do initial collections and then do grow outs with a deliverable. And then as long as they have first right of refusal, you can continue to grow that as a grower and make that available to a lot of other people. And oftentimes with us, it's just private partnerships. Maybe it's the Nature Conservancy, or maybe it's a military installation. There's a lot of ways that we can work, and we are private companies for the most part. So there's not a lot of red tape with us. We have different agreements with all different types of people, but at the end of the day, if we can come along and whether you get the initial seed or we get the initial seed, if there's a contract to grow for you or an agreement to grow, then hey, that's what we're here for. But it's the pie in the sky that, hey, we might like to use this and we have no idea how long those contracts are, how much seed you would get. That's harder and not quite as tangible.
It goes back to that uncertainty piece. But Brett, was there something you wanted to add on there too?
I think John hit most of the points that I had.
Okay.
For us too, I think it kind of comes back to bringing us in the conversation early enough that we can have conversations around it. Because a lot of times it's like, hey, you got this project, I need the seed this week or I need it next year. Well, I can't do anything about either one of those. But a couple of years in advance, sit down, have a conversation there again. We would probably also push towards a contract to get that seed available if it's not currently available today. But we are willing to do it. We just have to know early enough to make some collections and to get it put in so that we can meet the timeline required.
That's great. Okay, the next one comes from Tyler, and he's asking, over the last few decades, what shifts in demand have you seen for native seed? And how have you adjusted your production or business model in response?
I'd be happy to take that. I think a really interesting thing that happens with natives is that we see these spikes in demand for a certain purpose, and that purpose has changed many, many times, right? Maybe 10, 15 years ago, we started to see this increased need for pollinators. And so everybody ramped up their demand or their supply for pollinator species, and CRP changed to require more pollinator species, which is great. It wasn't too long until the conversation shifted to be specifically about the monarch butterfly, right? And and then several years later, all of a sudden, solar is the thing that's gobbling up all of the short species in the entire country. And so we see these waves, and we don't know what the next wave will be. But we do the best we can to respond as fast as we can, knowing that if the world is telling us we need more short native species, it takes us a handful of years to scale up and have more short native species. And so it's being part of these conversations, I think, is really valuable because we start to hear the rumblings of what people are paying attention to. And sometimes our government programs react to that. But it really is kind of fun to see and work with a product that has so many purposes and so many uses for so many different people. But we just, as an industry, we're kind of guessing, just hedging our bets.
Totally. If anyone else wants to answer that too, or I can go.
I've got a few things also. So as far as how we've shifted our business model, we predominantly were a company that produced very large lots of the varietals that the plant material centers release. So for us, over the last 10 years, we really have jumped off into the more local eco-type production, smaller production fields, half acre, 1 acre. And so, matter of fact, we have one whole farm that our goal is to have 87 1 acre fields on. And so we really are trying to step up and meet the demand and the interest of the industry and do more of those local eco-types species. The second thing that I've really noticed a major shift in over the last 10 or 20 years is the seed quality. I think the consumer is demanding a much higher quality of seed than they ever have before, which I think is great for the industry, great for the landowner, great for the environment. Weed seed, you used to kind of get away with a little bit here and there. Today, that's not the case. Everybody's wanting extremely clean, high purity, low other crop. And so our seed cleaning has gotten much more refined over the last 10 years, increasing the quality of the seed that ultimately goes out the door.
I guess just to add one thing from my perspective, over the past 10 or 15 years, it seems like the level of diversity in all of the mixes has really, really increased. At the start of CRP back in the early or late 80s, there were 4 or 5 species mixes and almost no forbs in them. And today, you can't put together anything that isn't at least 15 to 20 species. And I did one last week that had 60. I think that's a bit overkill because that's a long tag, but that's really what we've seen is the amount of diversity and the amount of different species that we have to keep sellable and in stock for projects going forward is really, really increased. The SKUs are just off the chart now.
Nice. Those are great answers. I'm going to go to the next top asked question, which is from Nicole. How can we collaborate with seed growers to request seeds from specific seed zones? I found that it can be challenging for suppliers to provide this information, and the seed zone source is not always clearly listed or readily available.
I can comment on that one. It kind of goes back to just getting a hold of us earlier in the process, but also with material we have on hand. That if it's a collection or a custom grow out, we have that information. If it wasn't a custom grow out or something like that, we'll at least have some county information. But specifically zone information might be missing on material like that. But any other custom grow outs we might be working on, or material that we got from a PMC or the ARS, we'll have that information readily available. It may not be plentiful if you're looking for a real diverse mix, that information may be lacking on several of them. But some of those ones that all of us are working on, that information should be readily available at a minimum to the, county, state level.
Anyone else want to tack that, or I can move on? All right. It looks like the next question is how or are you incorporating principles of reciprocity with the land and community, as mentioned by Robin Wall Kimmer this morning, in your business practices?
I guess I'll take that one because I listened into she was the keynote speaker this morning, correct? Yeah. I guess from my perspective, we've always been doing that. So she was speaking about things that we've been consistently doing. We do restoration projects here now, and we're doing a fairly large one right around West Fargo here. And, these are things that I'm going to look at for a very, very long time. And I want to be able to take my kids and my grandkids and maybe my great grandkids out to walk this diversion project with all the native species out there and say, this is something Grandpa did. That's the feeling that I think across the industry, most of us have. We really, really want these things to work because they're so cool looking. They do so much for the environment. They do so much for wildlife habitat. And just having a better world to live in, being able to walk through these things and see these things growing. Carbon sequestration, all those good things that come out of that. And so I see where she's coming from. I come from a completely different perspective than she does, but we're really trying to do the same thing that she's talking about.
Totally. We are getting towards the end. We have about a minute left. If there's any last comments anyone wants to make. Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
I'm just noticing a couple of comments in the chat real quick about diversity and, not being able to get all of the species that we need and want. And I would say, please just keep asking, right? We change our production based on those conversations. We work with our other seed companies based on those conversations. And that answer that you get about what we can provide is going to vary dramatically from year to year and from season to season. And so this year in the Midwest, production was a really tough year. Seed is going to be a little tighter than it typically has been, but that's not always the case. So if diversity is what you're after and that's important to your project, keep asking, right? And for some projects, that is what matters. And go into those projects knowing that there are years when certain species tank across the board, and we're doing what we can to meet that need, but we can't do it perfectly, of course.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you all, Brandon, for putting this together, and thank you all for joining. I mean, we really do need everyone involved in this, and so we love having you all involved in all the different committees and groups that you're a part of. And we need you, and we love working with you. So thank you all. And I think from there, if other people have questions for you, there were a lot of questions not answered, maybe they can contact you all and go forward from there.